The city was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that made your skin crawl, the kind that made you wonder if you were the only one left. The streets were empty, the buildings stood like silent sentinels, and the sky was a flat, oppressive gray. It was the silence of a world that had lost its soul. I remember the first time I felt it. I was walking down a bustling street, surrounded by people, but I felt utterly alone. It was as if everyone was moving in a daze, their eyes glazed over, their minds somewhere else. They were going through the motions, buying and selling, working and consuming, but there was no spark, no life. It was like watching a movie where the actors had forgotten their lines and were just going through the motions. That's when I started to notice the signs that something was deeply wrong with the world, the way people talked about value in economic terms, as if the only thing that mattered was money. The way they accepted poverty and environmental destruction as the price of progress. The way they believed that everything could be explained by science. Even the most profound aspects of human experience, like art and religion. Take Bach, for example. Daniel Dennett, a famous philosopher, once said that Bach's brilliance was just a result of the fortuitous accumulation of favorable adaptations in his nervous system. But that's not what Bach's music is about. It's about something deeper, something that touches the soul. Bach's music is a reflection of his deep, elaborate conception of God and life in a culture that invoked the divine through music. It's not about illusion or superstition. It's about profound insight and meaning. But in our world, those insights and meanings are being lost. We've replaced them with a cold, calculating view of reality. We measure everything in economic terms, and in doing so we've created a world where the poor are exploited, the environment is desolated, and the soul is silenced. We've created a global economy that is full of poor, sick, and dispirited people, and shoddy goods. We've decivilized ourselves and others, all in the name of progress. And yet, there's no outcry. We've cast off the delusion of human sanctity, and with it, we've lost our ability to see the value in things that can't be measured in dollars and cents. We've lost our sense of the sacred, our sense of the mysterious, and our sense of the profound. Science has given us incredible insights, but it has also given us a model of the world that is 100 years out of date. It's a model that reduces everything to a series of mechanical processes, a model that leaves no room for the soul, for the self, for the deep terrors and rich pleasures of the human experience. It's a model that tells us that moral behavior has little real meaning, and that inwardness, in the traditional sense, is not necessary or possible. We use analysts and therapists to dissect our experiences, to pull apart the things that our minds have created. We've dispelled the old mystery of subjectivity, and in doing so we've lost something precious. We've lost the essence of what makes us human, and it's not just about the individual, it's about the collective. We've created a collective fiction, a shared reality that is full of anxiety, empty of humor and generosity. It's a reality that feeds on fear, that tells us we are vulnerable and helpless, that tells us to be afraid of illness, of strangers, of the future. It's a reality that makes us lie awake at night, worrying about things we can't control. But the truth is, we are not powerless. We have the power to change this. We have the power to see the world in a different way, to value things that can't be measured in dollars and cents, to find meaning and purpose in life. We have the power to acclaim our souls, to reclaim our humanity. The city was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the silence of a world that had lost its soul. But maybe, just maybe, it was also the silence before the storm. The silence before a new dawn, the silence before a revolution. And I was ready to be a part of it. Jefferson once said that every generation has the right to make its own laws. Maybe he also thought that each generation can decide what counts as an illness. It's possible that our society has become too rigid, too nervous to handle playful behavior. We might not feel confident enough to teach or guide, so we label certain behaviors as illnesses instead of just wrong. Calling something an illness is powerful because it suggests the person can't control their actions, which can make them feel helpless. At the same time, it excuses them from being responsible. But then, we often blame their parents as if they chose to cause the problem through their actions, which seems unfair and doesn't make sense. This whole idea of illness replacing sin is like a story we tell ourselves, a story that mixes different ideas and feelings. We're so invested in this story that we don't notice how messy and inconsistent it is. We can't decide whether people are responsible for their actions or not, so we push the responsibility onto minor characters, like parents. In the past, people often understood the harshness of life and the certainty of death through stories and religious beliefs. The stories of Troy, for example, were full of suffering, but also inspired people for centuries. Today, we might not have a similar way to find comfort in the big, difficult questions of life. We're more likely to describe ourselves as sick rather than sinful, and we often ignore the deeper meanings behind our emotions. We might be so focused on our own grievances that we can't see the larger picture of human suffering. Our society used to believe in God, the soul, sin, and salvation, thinking that life had a bigger meaning beyond just this world. Even though many people in America still say they believe in these things, our culture is very focused on material success. We might make fun of the idea of success in old stories, but we still chase it, even if it's not as meaningful as we pretend. We can turn someone from a hero into a villain very quickly, and we often punish people for being who they are, even if we once admired them. What we really aim for is not success, but avoiding failure. We work hard to manage our money and buy things we think will make us happy, but these goals are pretty small and easy to lose. We might fear that someone with a baby could take away everything we hope for, but that's because our goals are so modest. We hope to receive happiness rather than create it, which makes us vulnerable to losing it. Religion used to give people a way to understand the world and their place in it. Today, we often ignore these beliefs, even if we still say we believe in them. Television and pop culture might try to fill this gap, but they can't replace the depth and meaning of real religious beliefs. If we still believe in a God who cares about us and our actions, how do we reconcile this with our small materialistic view of life? This disconnect might explain some of our deep anxieties and the narrow, intense stories we tell ourselves. Imagine if we started laughing at some of the things we take so seriously. What if we understood that being vulnerable is part of being human, and that everyone, our friends, enemies, and even our cities and books has value? We can find beauty and meaning in life, even through hard times. People have loved being human through plagues and famines, and we can do the same. Family is another concept that's hard to define. It's not just about blood relations, it's about the people we feel loyal to, the ones who give us identity, and the ones we share stories and traditions with. Families are special because they're often made up of people we wouldn't choose as friends, but that's part of their charm. They remind us that we owe kindness and loyalty to others, even when it's hard. Our culture has stopped romanticizing the family, and this has weakened it. We don't value patience, respect, loyalty, and generosity as much as we used to. We expect our relationships to be conditional, which is at the heart of the family crisis. We want to respect our parents and children only if they meet our high standards. But families should be about unconditional love and support, especially when things get tough. Imagine if we woke up one day and decided that family is a place of mutual loyalty, where we try to give meaning to each other's lives. We play with our babies, comfort the sick, celebrate holidays, and teach each other about right and wrong. We enjoy each other's company and show kindness and generosity. This might seem idealistic, but it's something many of us feel we're missing. We've lowered our expectations so much that even achieving these small goals can be a struggle. We need to remember the importance of solace and comfort in families. Instead of just treating symptoms, we should sit together and share our grief and questions about life. This is what families are for, and it's a beautiful thing even if it doesn't solve all our problems. We've forgotten the old American dreams of building something meaningful and stately. Instead, we see families as little factories for producing future workers and taxpayers. We've lowered our hopes without a good reason. We need to rethink how we support families, especially those who are struggling. We can't expect people to provide good care for their children if we take them away from their homes and put them in low-paying jobs. We need to value the time and attention families give each other, even if it's not always perfect. Families are more than just economic units. They are places of love, comfort, and growth. We need to remember this and work to support families in ways that recognize their true value. These days, many Americans work a lot more hours than they did 25 years ago. Back then, it was common for only one person in a household to work, while the other stayed home. But now, both parents often work, sometimes even holding down multiple jobs. This change means families spend less time together, and parents have less time with their kids. The reason for this isn't just because people are more ambitious. Many are just trying to make ends meet. Some work overtime because their employers want to avoid hiring new people. The numbers show that even though families are working twice as many hours, they're only making a little more money than before. This means the value of work has gone down, even though people are producing more. This change in how we live is significant, but it didn't happen because of a clear plan or a public decision. It's as if it just happened without anyone really noticing. Some people might think there's a hidden group of people causing this, but that's not likely. The big companies that used to control a lot have also faced challenges. When fewer people have good jobs, it's harder for the economy to do well. There's a common idea that we need to be more competitive with other countries. But this idea has led to lower wages and fewer jobs in traditional industries. If we force other countries to lower their wages or weaken their industries, they won't be able to buy as much from us. This means we're hurting ourselves by trying to hurt others. In the past, families in the West were shaped by reforms that aimed to make life better. For example, the idea that a single worker should earn enough to support a family was a big change. In the early days of industrialization, both adults and children worked long, harsh hours. People fought to change this, and the idea of a living wage became important. But now, we're seeing a return to a situation where many people work long hours for little pay. This problem is worse for those without education or skills. If we try to educate more people, it might actually make skilled labor less valuable. This means more people could end up in low-paying jobs. For a long time, the idea of the family was seen as important and worth protecting. But now, we're more focused on the idea that the economy should follow market rules, even if it means hurting families. For example, the weekend and the Sabbath used to give workers a break. Now many people work on Sundays because they need the money. This is especially hard on single parents and those without job security. The weekend and the Sabbath were important because they gave people time to rest and be with their families. Now, with more people working long hours, it's harder for families to spend time together. This can lead to more social problems, which can be expensive for society as a whole. We often hear that single mothers need to choose between work and welfare. But the real issue is that they need decent working hours and fair pay. These parents are doing a crucial job, and it's unfair that their lives are made so difficult. The weekend used to be a time for people to connect with their cultural and religious traditions. But now, with more people working on weekends, these traditions are fading. Different cultural groups feel less valued, and public institutions struggle to meet their needs. It's hard for the government to teach values and morals the way families and religious communities once did. It might be worth thinking about bringing back the idea of setting aside time for rest and religious observance. If people have more time to spend with their families and communities, it could help preserve our cultural diversity and strengthen our society. Right now, the ability to have a weekend off is often a sign of privilege, and it's leading to fewer people participating in religious and community life. Some people who call themselves traditionalists say we need to focus on competition and economic growth. But this often means that religion and family take a back seat. However, if people are paid better, they can buy more, which is good for the economy. When people are paid poorly, they can't afford to buy much, and this hurts everyone. In the end, it's important to think about how we value work and family. If we want a strong, diverse society, we need to make sure that people have the time and resources to build strong families and participate in their communities. The history of ideas, strange as it is, can shape our world in unexpected ways. Take communism, for example. It was more than just a political system. It was a kind of religion. It had its holy books, its saints, and its prophets. It had strict rules and a vision of a perfect future. But just like a religion, it could be rigid and inflexible, making it hard to solve real-world problems, especially in managing an economy. In many ways, we've done something similar with our own economic system. We've turned it into a kind of faith with its own priests and teachings. These priests, or economists and business leaders, tell us that the market is perfect and that it knows best. They say that competition is good and that those who win are the best, while those who lose deserve it. They tell us that helping the poor is bad because it interferes with the market. It's a simple and appealing idea, but it can be just as rigid and unhelpful as the old communist system. This way of thinking has deep roots. Some people say it comes from the Puritans, who believed that success was a sign of God's favor. But if you read what the Puritans actually wrote, you'll find they were more complex and thoughtful than that. They believed in helping the poor and being generous. They didn't just leave everything to the market. Today, some people even use science to justify their economic beliefs. They say that the rich are rich because they are smarter or more hardworking, and the poor are poor because they are less capable. This idea, called social Darwinism, has been around for a long time. It's a way to explain why some people succeed and others don't, but it's often used to avoid thinking about how we can make society fairer. But what if the problem isn't the poor or the less fortunate? What if the real issue is that those in charge aren't doing a good job? Maybe the people making decisions about our economy aren't as smart or capable as we think. Maybe they're just looking out for themselves, not the greater good. If that's true, then maybe we need to rethink who gets to be part of the elite and what it means to be a leader. Our society has lost something important. We used to value things like humor, pleasure, and charm. We valued courage, dignity, and graciousness. We valued loyalty, respect, and good faith. These things made life richer and more meaningful. But now, it seems like we've forgotten about them. We've become focused on making money and getting ahead, even if it means sacrificing these values. Why did we let this happen? Why did we trade these things for a system that doesn't seem to make anyone truly happy? Maybe it's because we've been told that this is the only way to succeed. But what if it's not? What if we could create a different kind of society? One where we have time for our families, our friends, and the things that make life worth living. We often say we're free, but are we really? Are we free to live the way we want? Or are we trapped by the rules of a system that doesn't care about our well-being? Maybe it's time to ask ourselves what true freedom really means and how we can achieve it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German pastor and theologian, faced similar questions during World War II. He saw how the Nazi regime was using religion to control people and how the church was being twisted to support their goals. Bonhoeffer and others formed the Confessing Church, a group that resisted the Nazis and tried to stay true to their faith. They believed that the church should be a place of love and justice, not a tool of the state. Bonhoeffer's story shows us that even in the darkest times, people can stand up for what is right. He believed that Jesus Christ, as he is described in the Bible, should be the center of the church and the guide for how we live our lives. Bonhoeffer's resistance wasn't just about fighting the Nazis. It was about living out his faith in a way that honored God and served others. So, what can we learn from Bonhoeffer and others like him? Maybe we need to rethink our priorities and values. Maybe we need to ask ourselves what kind of world we want to live in and what we are willing to do to create it. It's not an easy question, but it's one worth considering. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a man of deep faith and profound action. He lived in a time of great darkness during the rise of Nazi Germany, and his life and teachings continue to inspire people around the world. Bonhoeffer's theology was rooted in the idea of grace, God's boundless love and forgiveness that reaches even the most broken and sinful. Bonhoeffer believed that the church should be a place of refuge for the weak and the persecuted. He saw Christ in the faces of those who were suffering and felt a deep responsibility to help them. This wasn't just a theoretical belief for him, it was something he lived out every day. He once wrote, "An expulsion of the Jews from the West must necessarily bring with it the expulsion of Christ, for Jesus Christ was a Jew." This statement shows how deeply he understood that standing with the oppressed was standing with Christ. Bonhoeffer's life was a testament to his theology. He didn't just talk about the importance of helping others. He put it into practice. He was part of the Confessing Church, a group of Protestant dissenters who resisted the Nazi regime. He organized the Pastors' Emergency League to send uncorrupted ministers to serve in parishes where the ministers had been influenced by Nazism. He also wrote and preached, using his words to encourage and inspire others to stand up against evil. Despite the challenges he faced, Bonhoeffer remained grateful and focused on the positive. He believed that the church should be a place of love and compassion, not a place of judgment and exclusion. He saw the church as a community that was open and inclusive, one that didn't draw strict boundaries between who was in and who was out. For Bonhoeffer, the love of God was vast and all-encompassing, and the church should reflect that love. Bonhoeffer's life was marked by a deep commitment to prayer and study. He spent hours each day in prayer and meditation, and he looked forward to the liturgical calendar, celebrating the important events in the Christian year. Even in prison, he maintained his faith and continued to find joy in his spiritual practices. He once said, "When the totality of history should stand before God, there Christ stands." This statement shows his belief that Christ is present in all of history, and that his love and presence are constant. Bonhoeffer's resistance to the Nazi regime was not just political. It was deeply rooted in his faith. He believed that, as a Christian, he had a moral obligation to stand up against injustice. He wrote, "The Church has an unconditional obligation to the victims of any ordering of society, even if they do not belong to the Christian community. This means that the Church should not just help its own members, but should stand with anyone who is suffering." Bonhoeffer's theology was not about following a set of rules. It was about living a life guided by the will of God. He believed that the will of God is revealed in every situation, and that it requires us to be attentive and responsive. He wrote, "The will of God is not a system of rules which is established from the outset. It is something new and different in each situation in life, and for this reason a person must ever anew examine what the will of God may be. This means that we should not rely on a fixed set of rules, but should instead seek to understand what God is asking of us in each moment." Bonhoeffer's life and teachings challenge us to live with courage and compassion. He showed that faith is not just about believing in certain doctrines. It is about living out those beliefs in the world. He believed that the church should be a place of radical inclusion and love, and that Christians should be at the forefront of fighting against injustice. Bonhoeffer's life and death remind us that the Christian faith is a call to action, a call to stand with the weak and the oppressed, and to live in a way that reflects the boundless love of God. Bonhoeffer's ideas and writings, especially as reflected in his letters during his imprisonment, reveal a profound and deeply personal theology. He believed that to truly understand and live the Christian faith, one must engage fully with the world, even in its most challenging and painful aspects. For Bonhoeffer, faith was not an abstract concept, but a lived reality, rooted in the everyday experiences of life and the struggles of the world. In his letter to Bethe, Bonhoeffer emphasizes the importance of this worldliness in Christianity. He argues that true faith involves embracing life's duties, problems, successes, and failures. By doing so, one aligns with the suffering of God in the world, much like Christ in Gethsemane. This perspective challenges the notion that faith is a retreat from the world. Instead, it is an active engagement with it, a commitment to love and serve others, even in the face of adversity. Bonhoeffer's theology of costly grace further discusses this point. He criticizes the idea of cheap grace, which he sees as a way for people to feel good about their sins without genuine commitment. For Bonhoeffer, true grace comes with the obligation of discipleship, which means obedience to Christ. Faith and obedience are inseparable. One cannot have genuine faith without living it out in action. This concept was deeply influenced by his time at Finkenwalde, where he taught and lived with young men who were committed to this kind of costly discipleship. In his book, Life Together, Bonhoeffer describes the community at Finkenwalde as a model of Christian life. He emphasizes that the community is possible only through Christ, and it is in Christ that we truly have one another. This idea of community is not just a social construct, but a spiritual reality, where the presence of Christ is felt and experienced. Bonhoeffer's vision of the Church is not just an institution, but a living, breathing entity that embodies the love and presence of Christ. Bonhoeffer's decision to return to Germany in 1939, despite the risks, demonstrates his commitment to this theology. He felt a deep sense of responsibility to his country and his faith, even if it meant facing imprisonment and death. His engagement with the resistance against Hitler and his involvement in the plot to assassinate him were not just political acts, but expressions of his deeply held beliefs about the Christian's duty to resist evil and seek justice. Even in the darkest moments of his imprisonment, Bonhoeffer's letters to Beth and Maria von Wedemeyer reveal a profound sense of hope and faith. He writes about the possibility of a religionless Christianity, suggesting that the essence of Christian faith is not tied to religious institutions or practices, but to the presence of Christ in the world. This presence is not limited to the church, but is found in the everyday experiences of life, in the love and compassion we show to others. Bonhoeffer's theology is characterized by a deep belief in the immanence of God. He sees the sacred in the ordinary, in the beauty of creation, and in the love and goodness that people share. This belief is not a theoretical abstraction, but a lived reality, a way of seeing the world that transforms suffering into a means of deeper connection with God and others. In his final days, Bonhoeffer's faith remained unshaken. He continued to find joy and gratitude in the smallest moments of life, even in the harsh conditions of his imprisonment. His words, "This is the end, for me, the beginning of life," reflect a profound trust in the ultimate goodness and presence of God. Bonhoeffer's life and writings challenge us to live our faith with the same depth of commitment and love, to embrace the world in all its complexity, and to find in it the presence of the divine. In the early days of America, people often talked about helping those in need. This idea wasn't new. It was rooted in ancient texts, like the Old Testament. For example, in Deuteronomy it says, "You shall not oppress a hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of your brethren or of your strangers that are in your land within your gates. At his day you shall give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor, and sets his heart on it, lest he cry against you to the Lord, and it be sin for you." This means that if someone works for you, you should pay them fairly and promptly, because they might be poor and depend on that money. Jonathan Edwards, a famous preacher from the 1700s, strongly believed in helping the poor. He said that it was not enough to wait until someone was desperate before helping them. Instead, people should be generous and give even if the person didn't have anyone else to rely on. He quoted from Deuteronomy, which says, "For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command you, saying, Thou shalt open thy hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land." Edwards emphasized that God commands us to be generous and willing to help others. Another important figure, John Calvin, also wrote about the importance of helping others. In his book, Institutes of the Christian Religion, Calvin said that we should help anyone who needs it, even if they are strangers or have done wrong to us. He argued that everyone bears the image of God, and this should be enough reason to treat them with kindness and love. Calvin believed that loving our enemies and returning good for evil was a way to follow God's example. These ideas didn't just stay in old books. They influenced how people lived and taught their children. One of the most popular educational tools in early America was the New England Primer. This little book taught children to read using religious and moral lessons. It included passages that encouraged people to be kind and fair, like the lines, "And pay him still without delay, his wages for his pain. And as you would another man against you should proceed, do you the same to them again if they should stand in need. As America grew, the Middle West became a crucial region. In this area, people like William McGuffey created educational materials that reflected these values. McGuffey was a teacher and a minister who wrote a series of books called the McGuffey Readers. These books were used in schools to teach reading and moral lessons. Many people think of the McGuffey Readers as simple, old-fashioned books that taught children to be honest and hard-working. However, the truth is more interesting. McGuffey was part of a group of people who believed in reforming society. They wanted to make the world a better place by fighting against slavery, improving education, and promoting women's rights. The writers whose works McGuffey included in his readers were often part of this reform movement. For example, Jacob Abbott, who wrote stories for the readers, was a strong supporter of education for girls. James Russell Lowell, another contributor, was a famous abolitionist who wrote against slavery. Sarah Josepha Hale, who wrote about women's rights, was also included. These reformers believed that education was the key to changing society. They wanted to teach children about the importance of helping others, being kind, and standing up for what is right. The McGuffey Readers included stories and poems that encouraged these values. They weren't just about being successful or making money. They were about building a better, more just society. Despite this, many people today think of the McGuffey Readers as old-fashioned and conservative. They assume that the books only taught children to be obedient and hard-working. But the truth is more complex. The writers and editors of the McGuffey Readers were part of a movement that was trying to make the world a better place. They believed in equality, education, and the power of kindness. The reformers' efforts had a lasting impact on American society. They helped to end slavery, improve education, and promote women's rights. The McGuffey Readers played a role in spreading these ideas to a whole generation of children. By teaching values like fairness, kindness, and responsibility, they helped to shape the America we know today. Understanding the true history of the McGuffey Readers and the reformers who created them is important. It shows that the values of helping others and working for a better world have deep roots in American culture. These values are not just old-fashioned ideas. They are essential to building a fair and just society. By learning about this history, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the people who worked to make the world a better place and be inspired to continue their legacy. The story of the abolition movement in the Middle West is a tale of passionate individuals who saw the world through a lens of deep moral conviction. Revivalist preachers like Charles Grandison Finney and George Washington Gale spearheaded a religious awakening that not only transformed personal lives, but also sparked a powerful movement against slavery. Their efforts were fueled by the belief that religion and education were key to creating a just society. Arthur Tappan, a wealthy New York merchant, played a crucial role in supporting this movement. He used his fortune to fund schools and organizations that promoted abolition. One of these was the Oneida Institute, an experimental college that embraced racial integration and manual labor as part of its educational philosophy. Tappan's support extended to the Lane Theological Seminary in Cincinnati, where young abolitionists like Theodore Weld led the charge against slavery, often at great personal risk. Lyman Beecher, a prominent Presbyterian minister, moved to Cincinnati to lead the Lane Theological Seminary. His family, including his children, Harriet Beecher Stowe and Henry Ward Beecher, became influential figures in the abolition movement. Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, became a powerful tool for swaying public opinion against slavery. While Henry Ward Beecher used his pulpit to advocate for abolition and social reform, the Beechers and their allies faced significant challenges, especially in the South, where their efforts were often met with violence and hostility. Nevertheless, they persevered, establishing schools and colleges that promoted their values of equality and justice. One such institution was Oberlin College, which became a hub of abolitionist activity and a model for progressive education. William Holmes McGuffey, an educator and Presbyterian minister, played a pivotal role in spreading these values through his widely used school readers. Despite the contentious political climate, McGuffey's readers managed to find a place in both the North and the South. They emphasized virtues like kindness, generosity, and hard work, and they often included stories that promoted empathy and moral reflection. While the readers did not directly address the issue of slavery, they helped shape a moral framework that was at odds with the institution of slavery. The influence of these educators and reformers extended beyond the classroom. They created a network of schools and communities that fostered a culture of literacy, activism, and social responsibility. This culture played a crucial role in the abolition movement and in shaping the values of the Middle West. Their legacy is a testament to the power of education and moral conviction in bringing about social change. In the end, the abolition movement in the Middle West was a testament to the belief that a better world is possible. Through their tireless efforts, these individuals helped lay the groundwork for a more just and equitable society. Their story is a reminder that change often begins with a few passionate individuals who are willing to challenge the status quo and fight for what they believe is right.